veneer of a few feet. The actual topsoil, which grows the crops, is a thin veneer on top of other kinds of soil and rocks and sedimentation. But the topsoil itself is quite thin. I've heard figures that a half to a third of all the topsoil in the Mississippi Valley, which is the whole Midwestern area, has washed down into the Gulf of Mexico and is now salted up and can never be retrieved. So how much longer do we have in this breadbasket of the country where most of our grain is grown? The same thing is happening here in California, the San Joaquin Valley. I remember the City Hall of, well, I was thinking of San Jose, where the City Hall sank some feet because of the aquifer being depleted, but there's similar things happening in the Central Valley as well. Soil is irreplaceable. What happens as it's farmed for grain is that for a large part of the year it's barren, and the rains come, wash it away, and take away that valuable resource that sustains civilization. Another aspect of our natural resources are the forests. As you know, we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. And the plants breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. So this is a great oversimplification, and Don can correct me if I simplify too much. But that's the general idea. When more carbon dioxide is produced by humans and other sources, it goes up into the stratosphere and creates a greenhouse effect, where the heat, which naturally coming in from the sun would be radiated back into space, is trapped. Some of it escapes, but more of it accumulates here. So that's why the climate, over a long period of time, gets warmer and warmer. We've had, as you know, some of the warmest decades on record. When I grew up in Los Angeles, we never heard of a temperature above 100. Until maybe the last few years I was there, it went up to 101, 102, which is unprecedented. Last summer, it went up to 119 on one particularly hot day. Just an example of some of the things that are happening as the heat trapped in this greenhouse effect increases. Well, there are many other natural resources I can talk about, depletion, including the oceans, which are under tremendous pressure. And of course, we have the pressures of population. Every year, globally, there are 80 million more people than there were the year before. I saw a UN figure that each year 18,000 children die of malnutrition, globally speaking. As sea level rises, as a result of the melting of ice, which in turn is a result of the melting of the glaciers and the ice in Arctic and Antarctic. Sea level rises, there will be millions, maybe over 100 million climate refugees, I should say. Bangladesh is one example, most extreme example. 140 million people live in areas that will be inundated by 2 or 3 feet increase in the sea level, a rise in the sea level. In Bay Area, in California as a whole, it's estimated that 480,000 people will have to be relocated as sea level continues to go up. Nobody knows just when. It could be sooner, it could be later. That's among the things that we don't know. It's not simply the rise of the sea level, but the storm surges that result from climatic warming, which wash up above sea level and will cause a great deal of distress among people who live in those areas. Just a 2 or 3 feet, a 3-foot rise in sea level would drown San Francisco Airport and Oakland Airport. So what do we do for transportation? Not only that, they would drown the approaches, road approaches. The engineers were designing the new part of the Bay Bridge, the eastern aspect of the Bay Bridge, which was the damage of the Loma Prieta earthquake. They were concerned with seismic strengthening. And they strengthened it seismically, but they neglected to realize that sea level rise would inundate the bridge approaches in the East Bay, where you're several miles, you're driving about a couple of feet above sea level. Well, I don't want to distress you too much. I'll simply say that there are resemblances between the recession and the results of climate change. That up till this last recession, we were living beyond our means. We assumed that the bubble of prosperity would go on forever, and so we acted accordingly. Went into debt. Multiply that by a factor of about 10, of the power of 10, I should say, and you'll understand a little bit more about climate change. Civilization developed during this bubble, which we assumed would go on forever, but we neglected to take into account the pollution that we're causing that is creating the greenhouse effect that traps the heat and changes the ecosystems, resulting in the migration, in some cases, the elimination of species. We have been borrowing from the future. A couple of books that have been written recently on global warming. One by Mark Hertzgaard, who's a resident of the Bay Area. One by James Hansen, who is probably the foremost climate scientist, who's bringing this matter to our attention. Talk in terms of their children and grandchildren, and what kind of a world they're going to live in. Are our coming generations going to be living in a depleted planet? Depends on what we do. I think we maybe should talk a little bit more about what we can do, what kind of action we can take. I'm delighted that there's a green committee here in the church that is telling us where to put what kinds of recycling materials. Recycling, I think, is a good thing, but reusing is better. I think there should be standard sizes, say, of wine bottles or cans or containers, so that they can be sterilized and put back into circulation rather than having to go through that industrial process of total recycling. But in any case, recycling is the beginning. We've got lights, light bulbs and light fixtures that are more economical and use about half the energy of the old type of bulbs. We have cars, beginning to have cars that emit less carbon emissions, if I can use that term. And I've been very encouraged by the suddenness and the rapidity of the idea of grading our whole society and whole culture is catching fire, if I can use that term, which I probably shouldn't. Don, I think I've talked much too long. And it's your turn, and it's our whole turn to pick up from here and go on where you want to go. So take it over.
What I'd like to point out first, contrary to our general view of great historical movements and the ability to change, that history is its own master and simply moves as a tidal wave, looking at the present day, this is not the case. Three enterprising faculty women, or faculty wives in Berkeley, led by Kay Kerr, wife of the chancellor of the time, the president of the system, Clark Kerr, and two companions, thought that something must be done to save the Bay. This was in the early 50s. At that time, every city margining the Bay was planning to dump refuse into the Bay, fill it out, and essentially double their area, increasing their tax base and great progress with huge quotation marks. The Crocker Land Corporation was going to scalp Mount Bruno and take all of that land and double the size of Palo Alto, East Palo Alto. This was simply standard. This was progress. Now, in his writings, Hal has said, he just, in his writings, shook his head, said these women were crazy. There's no way they can stop progress. But they organized Save the Bay, which was publicized very effectively by Hal's arguments in his weekly column, and then he put it together in a book, The San Francisco Bay, published through the Sierra Club's sponsorship, sent to every congressman. And that had a great deal to do with the stopping of this massive incursion into the Bay, which would change the entire environmental basis of this area in which we live, part of our life. And at the same time, during these wild post-war expansionist periods, highways were being built everywhere under the Eisenhower doctrine of highways everywhere, including up the peninsula, right through San Mateo, across Golden Gate Park, and connecting with a larger connection to Golden Gate Park, to Golden Gate Bridge, and up around the North Bay, around what is now Point Reyes. Huge enterprises there, new cities, hotels, factories, lining the coast of California. How could an individual stop the behemoth of this, quote, progress? Well, they did. They got Phil Burton in the Congress. They got ties up with a number of